Good morning, good afternoon, and to some people, good evening. My name is Ming Moreno. I'm the Deputy Director General of CACCI, and I welcome you to today's webinar on a very important subject that is affecting many economies at this moment. The title of today's presentation is Competing and Cooperating in the Asia-Pacific region amid a changing technology landscape, leveraging diversity for technological sovereignty and complementary strength. This complex subject has been a matter of study and development by Professor Güven Sak, who is the Managing Director of the Economic Policy Research Foundation of Turkey, TEPAV. Professor Güven Sak graduated from the University of East Anglia in the UK with a master's degree in economics in 1984 and a PhD in economics from the Middle East Technical University in 1994. He was a founding member of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of the Republic of Turkey, to which he was appointed as an external member in 2001 for a term of 5 years. Also, he was a director of the TOBB University of Economics and Technology from 2011 and 2013. And currently is the managing director of the TEPAV. Besides Professor Güven Sak, we also have the pleasure to join the conversation Ms. Selin Arslanhan, who is in charge of the Innovation Studies program at TEPAV. And then at the end, when we have the Q&A session, we will have another expert, also from TEPAV, would be Ms. Sibel Güven from TEPAV. She's in charge of the Sustainability Governance Program. She also has a PhD, again, a PhD in operational research from the Middle East Technical University. So this presentation has a lot of academic background and research. And when we see the amount of data that he will be presented online, I hope that many of our bankers, especially, and some researchers and policymakers that join in the audience will issue some interesting questions. Because as the global supply chains change and the trade agreements also change, the Asia-Pacific is in a turning point that requires a very specific understanding of how the supply chain and the economic conditions and the trade conditions will evolve in these few years, especially for CACCI members. So now, without no more delay, I will pass the control to Professor Güven Sak to say some introductory words, and then we go for the presentation.
Today, we are going to talk about technology and the CACCI countries. Because technology, we know that technology determines our lives, but it has become, the impact has become more profound lately. And now, forecasting the future, thinking about the future, what the future may bring in terms of technological change has become much more important. And when we look around in different countries, it is possible, in fact, to see new administrative structures. There are ministries of the future, for example, in many countries now it's developing. In Singapore, there is this Center for Strategic Futures. In the United Arab Emirates, and Singapore is one of the CACCI countries, as far as I remember. And in the United Arab Emirates, for example, there is the Ministry of Possibilities. So looking for the possibilities, forecasting the possibilities. In Sweden, there is within the foreign ministry, there is a strategic futures planning unit. And there are, I see, when I look around, it is not only related with the governments, government offices, government agencies, but it is also a factor, a trend that's becoming important when it comes to the companies too. I'm now seeing new titles in some books too, talking about design futurists or trend forecasters. So I think it is a timely topic to discuss how the global landscape is changing with technological developments very rapidly nowadays. So it is an era of, profound change. Global landscape is shifted. There is a deepening technology race, which is important. And in this environment, there is the growing need to rethink new models of cooperation. That's what we are going to do today, Selin. That's what we are going to do when it comes to the CACCI countries. Because this new landscape brings both challenges and opportunities for everybody and for the CACCI countries too. And we are going to discuss how diversity, when it comes to the CACCI countries, is also an asset when it comes to focusing on regional cooperation among the CACCI countries. So in the next slide, we have a general framework for the competitiveness of different countries. So the balloons show the exports of different countries. And in the horizontal axis, you can see the number of products exported competitively by different countries. The CACCI countries are the black dots. And you can see China too, and the Western countries are on the right-hand side in 1995. And the vertical axis is the number of countries are exporting competitively. So as you can see, the landscape was dominated by the Western countries, even in 1995. But this is now changing. So when we look at 2023, there is a shift. And as you can see, on the upper right-hand side now, in terms of the most number of products that are exporting competitively, and the countries are exporting. When we look at that, we see now three countries, not the Western countries, but China, Turkey, and India. So two of them are the CACCI countries when you look at it from that angle. China is not surprising, of course. After the 1980s, with the move of production capabilities from west to the east, seems to have created an important impact in terms of the competitiveness. Let me underline that issue once again. These are the countries that are exporting, that has the highest number of products exported competitively to the highest number of countries. So it's possible to see the change along the way. And now in the next slide, it's possible to have a look at the high-tech exports, because this is an age where the high-tech exports are increasing very rapidly too. You can see China, Vietnam. Again, in the horizontal axis, this is the change in the share of world exports. As you can see, Vietnam has increased its exports around 4%, 4 percentage points, and Taiwan and India has increased. Turkey is in the middle this time. And in the vertical axis, you can see the change in the export volume of different countries. So the export volumes of the countries are also increasing. This time, by the way, it's not black, but the CACCI countries are the red dots this time. And the size of the dot again shows the volume of exports of the country. So when we look at high-tech exports of the CACCI countries over the years, from 1995 to 2010 to 2023, it's possible to see that electronics have become increasingly central in the high-tech exports of CACCI countries over the years. And then you look at the imports, it's again possible to see that high-tech electronics also requires importing high-tech components also. So when you look at the CACCI's high-tech imports from 1995, 2010 to 2023, it's possible again to see that electronics trade, electronics components, an important share in the imports of CACCI countries when it comes to the high-tech exports. And the trade partners of the CACCI countries has changed also significantly, dramatically in fact. In 1995, the share of United States was about to be 30%, but this has declined to 12 in 2010 and around 17%, 16.7% in 2023. But on the same way, the share of China, which was 4.2% in 1995, has increased significantly over the years. So CACCI countries are exporting high-tech electronics products, an important electronics component, and they are doing that now more with China and also with the United States. I have also had to underline the issue that both US and China are the leading countries when it comes to the technological change around the world. So when we look at the technology products that the CACCI countries are now, can you explain this one?
And now let's look at high-tech products. First of all, we will look at the sophistication level of new export products in CACCI countries. We are exporting more, but are we exporting smarter? Between 2008 and 2023, many CACCI countries added new products to their export baskets. Firstly, look at Vietnam. They added 37 new export products in that period, and the created value is very high because the export products, the new export products, are high technology products, especially from electronics industry. On the other hand, in that period, Turkey added 32 new export products. This number is similar. However, the technology level, the sophistication level of Turkey's new export products and the created value are completely different from Vietnam. In summary, it's not just the number of new products, new export products that matters. It's about technology and sophistication level, which we are trying to talking about today.
Like to,
Okay.
because that requires
Okay.
adaptation to the new technologies and the level of adaptation of different countries, among CACCI countries, that differs too. The readiness is not the same among the countries.
We need to ask which CACCI countries are ready to use and adapt these frontier technologies, these critical technologies such as AI, biotechnology, advanced materials, because, high-tech industries such as electronics now function as platforms, as technology platforms, integrating with key technologies like advanced materials, artificial intelligence, energy technologies. It's a technology platform, and countries' competitiveness in these high-tech industries depends heavily on its ability to lead these frontier technology domains. Table is from UN's Frontier Technology Readiness Index. It measures countries' readiness to adopt and use frontier technologies. CACCI has a diverse structure here again. There are high readiness countries like South Korea, Singapore, Japan, Australia, and there are moderate readiness countries like India, Russia, Turkey, Malaysia, and there are emerging ones, including Vietnam. And there are some other countries still need technology development, technology ecosystem improvement, actually. This trend also tells us that strong high-tech exports don't always mean strong technology ecosystems, don't always mean readiness for frontier technology for the future. We need to focus on local technology ecosystems, not just production, not just manufacturing and export of high technology products, actually. Here is another related indicator to talk about technological competitiveness. Corporate R&D in particular plays a critical role in the broader technology ecosystem development, including universities, research centers, startups, entrepreneurs, because it also supports long-term human capital development and scientific development. According to 2024 EU Industrial R&D Scoreboard, 85% of global R&D spending comes from just 2,000 companies in the world. In fact, only 2,000 companies lead the new technologies development in the world, we see from which
But
countries?
it is mostly the US and China leading the process
Yeah,
of both in terms of readiness, they are good, and also in terms of corporate R&D. US and
yeah,
China are the biggest ones. So that's
yeah,
why they are leading this wave of technological change. But there are many CACCI countries, only the high readiness ones, the ones with high readiness level, but at the moderate readiness level countries too, there are companies that are focusing on corporate R&D. So that's also something positive that we need to take into account. But the process is led by US and China at the end of the day. That's the major technology race area. This is the major competition area. So if we continue with the next slide, this is the CACCI's position in critical technology. So this is the artificial intelligence, the platforms that you have mentioned. And the countries are the red ones. Again, the process was led by US, China, but on the fourth, the Singapore comes into the picture. Continue with the other technology areas, technology platforms, maybe I have to say.
Maybe we can give some information about this critical technology, how we applied this methodology, and how we have these results, these findings, because it's important to compare as the countries to design future cooperation models for technology development. Actually, we are looking critical technologies in detail at these structures analysis. You will also see at the paper in detail. In this part of study, we focused on 4 critical technologies that shaped the global trends: AI, biotechnology, advanced connectivity, and energy technologies. You will see the details. We looked at each country's scientific performance, like search and publications, and their industrial strength, which includes production, exports, patents. And then we compared each country's results with the global leader in technology, in each technology domain, actually, to see how close or how far they are from the global technology frontier.
This is advanced connectivity. Maybe you explain advanced connectivity. You mentioned it, but again, the CACCI countries are red ones over there. So it's possible to make a comparison against US. China leads the process. Would you like to say anything more, or shall we go over just to show the CACCI's position? That there are cooperation mechanisms that we need to focus on.
Just that CACCI also performs strongly here, especially South Korea, Japan, Singapore, and India. And I need to tell India's scientific strength is impressive, but its industrial side still needs improvement.
It's like the European Union then. Anyway, let's go to the third one, biotechnology. And again, you see that US and China leads the process. Some countries may differ in the among the top 10, but then the CACCI countries are again the red ones. Next one is energy technologies. Again, here we see China is leading the process, the technological change. Germany is second, and USA is the third. And the CACCI countries are again the red ones that we need to take into account. Next slide, very quickly, but if CACCI is relatively closer to the global frontier in artificial intelligence and advanced connectivity. What does that mean? Maybe you explained that. You mentioned both the scientific achievements and also the industrial strength or industrial capacity.
Actually, this picture gives us the proximity to global best practice. In other words, how ready CACCI countries compete in these key technologies. So we see CACCI's performance in advanced connectivity and AI is better. However, when we come to energy technologies and biotechnology, especially in biotechnology, CACCI countries still lags behind. So when we are talking about cooperation models in CACCI, like biotech research hubs, clean in energy partnerships, could make difference here. Before the policy recommendations for cooperation models, we can summarize the main findings in a few points. First of all, as we mentioned, CACCI's diversity can be a strength, not a weakness. And the second point is high-tech exports does not always mean you have a real technology power, working technology ecosystem. There is also a need to work on technology, local technology ecosystems and technology cooperations. And the third point is CACCI countries trade more with China and US than with each other, especially in high technology industries. It's also an important point. And finally, we see again and again that countries have good scientific research, research infrastructure, but weak industry or weak research, but strong industry. So there is a real gap between these scientific and industrial performance, and also intra-CACCI trade for specifically high technology industries.
This is kind of a technology race that we need to take into account. That's why the existing performance in high-tech exports is not enough. So there is the need to develop a domestic capacity, a domestic ecosystem for the new technologies, for innovation capacity within the countries or within regions. Because otherwise, while you are producing some high-tech products, the nature of those products, the technologies behind those products are changing in some other countries very rapidly. So it is important to be in the process of creating the new technologies. And that's, I think, what we are going to discuss in the next slide. So these are the red ones are the technology areas, as we have mentioned. Maybe you go over them. But the important issue is how we are going to create an environment to develop those technologies in a domestic environment or in a regional environment.
I think the important issue is talking about the process of technological transformation and technology integration into the traditional value chains consists of three main stages. These are different stages and these requires different tools, different cooperation models. The horizontal technology platforms, and there are different stages. The first stage is about applying and spreading existing technologies in value chains, actually. In some cases, this means using the same technologies in their already common areas, but it can also mean adapting these existing technologies to meet new needs in areas where they are not yet widely used, actually.
There is also this time horizon here that in our minds, it starts from 2025 to 2053. So in 2025, that's where we are in many of the CACCI countries, in some of the CACCI countries at least, with high-tech exports. They are already applying existing technologies and, disseminating that also in their countries, aren't they? So that's where we are now at this stage. But there are some other countries to do that. But we shouldn't forget that this is a recurring process also, because this is a process that's continuing. So new technologies are coming one after the other. So we first have to learn how to apply the existing technology. We need to learn about applying the existing technologies and their dissemination and follow their dissemination in the value chains. And then we focus on the transfer and scaling of new technologies. And then at a later stage, at some stage, or let me put it that way, we focus on developing new technologies and innovation by creating that domestic technology ecosystem in our countries.
I just want to underline These states can also be concurrent. Actually, they are concurrent states. We need to focus all of them together, not just one. We can try to develop some of the technologies and try to diffuse existing ones in other value chains. So I will move forward to the policy recommendations.
So these are our recommendations now for the CACCI countries in general. So why don't you start? We first mention about building a CACCI strategic foresight alliance. It's about kind of, thinking about the future, I think, also.
The Strategic Foresight Alliance with a specific focus on critical technologies, actually. This platform would help CACCI countries plan together, share data, monitor global technology trends, and this will also focus on public-private dialogue to be ready for the future technologies and future value chains. Maybe we can tell a bit more detail for governance model and how we will design it, but maybe we can do that at the Q&A section.
The second building block is joint R&D platforms in critical technologies. So we need to focus on the critical technologies, and there is the need for a kind of a CACCI technology investment fund at the end of the day to make this change possible at the end of the day.
We need to support early stage R&D and commercialization actually jointly. We see the different stages previously.
When talking about this, we have to have in our minds the gap between, as we have mentioned, gap between scientific performance and industrial strength. In order to make that possible, it is useful to have a kind of an investment fund to support corporate R&D at the end of the day, and industrialization, commercialization of the new ideas, new technologies at the end of the day. So that's why it's important. So we need to follow the new technologies. There is the need for a kind of a strategic foresight, strategic futures approach. Let's put it that way. And then in order to operationalize that, there is the need for R&D platforms and a kind of a funding mechanism too at the same time to support the corporate R&D activities. Then it comes to aligning standards and certification for the critical technologies, and it's about the regulatory environment for the new technologies, which is under discussion, I think, all around the world at the same time nowadays, starting from AI to other new technologies.
These regulatory sites can be work as an accelerator to speed up technology and new products deployment and diffusion and enable joint product development actually, because it will work with these joint R&D platforms and these technology funds and complement the strategic foresight alliance strategies. So these regulation part will also activate and improve public-private dialogue with a focus on critical technologies. I think these all parts, the regulation part, the implementation part, and also the strategy domain will complement each other to improve the CACCI technology ecosystem.
And now I can conclude. Think about this targeted industrial policy and technology cooperation among the CACCI countries. But when discussing this, before going with these points, let me also note let me remind you what I have mentioned at the outset. This is a new age where technology determines our lives profoundly. So this is an age of technology race. And I think I think the dominant powers in this race are learning bad things from each other. We have discussed in the past about the negative impact of the Chinese dominance. But now with the Trump tariffs, I think the Americans are learning bad things from China too. So that makes other countries in the world, including the CACCI countries, to focus on creating these domestic environments for technological development, technology change, among themselves. This is an issue for all other countries, I think, in the new framework. So that's why I think it's not only the technological development, but this new attitude that we are changing among the dominant powers makes us to rethink new models of cooperation among our countries. And what we had shown is that the CACCI countries are not homogeneous. There is heterogeneity, there is diversity, and diversity could be considered as an asset for complementary specialization and technology cooperation, which is very much useful. And it's obvious that there is a need to move from a single nation approach to collaborative approach for creating regional ecosystems for technological development here. When we talk about creating domestic ecosystems, national ecosystems, it's about creating a regional ecosystem covering a few countries. So we bring our strength together in order to do something to achieve a new technology ecosystem in our region, in our countries. I think that's how I see it. Selin, do you have anything to add?
We tried to provide a technology-focused lens to assess CACCI's position in this global landscape. However, this is only the beginning. In following studies, the models and policy recommendations outlined here should be further developed into more detailed tools with technology-specific ones, the country-specific ones, and also value chain-specific studies.
So now let's start the conversation into more details. We already have some questions in the Q&A. And here, the first one that is a block says, some anonymous attendee says, do you foresee any challenge in implementing TEPAV policy recommendations?
Who is going to answer? Of course there are challenges. Of course there are challenges, because that requires a kind of a deep understanding among countries about the major trends that we are seeing around the world nowadays. But I think it is important for business support organizations in this environment. As I have noted, now it's not only the governments that are focusing on the futures, on what future can bring to different countries. Now is the time to think about what future can bring to our companies also. So that's why there are these new jobs like design futurists and also trend forecasters. So this is kind of, establishing a mechanism in business support organizations, because, when it comes to think about futures, the US companies and the companies in our part of the world are totally different. US companies are big. They are multinationals. They are doing all those things by themselves. They can hire so many consultants in order to focus on, they can hire a design futurist. For each of them can hire one. They can have trend forecasters for themselves. But I think in our part of the world, that's why where the companies are smaller compared to the American ones, especially the Americans one and the Chinese ones also at the same time. Those are all state-owned, state-related companies, big ones again. So in our part of the world, that's where the business support organizations like CACCI are much more important. So instead of each company individually focusing on the foresight mechanism, thinking about the futures, etc., I think it is useful for organizations like CACCI or business support organizations in our part of the world to focus on establishing, maybe at the outset, smaller units about what the future can bring to our economies, to our companies. So think about the trends, trying to forecast the possibilities. So because that's why, for example, Center for Strategic Futures is named like that in Singapore. Maybe we can learn from the Singaporeans about this issue. Another CACCI country, they have this Center for Strategic Futures. It means that there is not only one future. There are many futures that we may have. So it all depends on, for all of us, to be ready to understand the trends and to be ready for the futures, so that we can choose among them. We can focus on what we are going to choose among them. And that requires some readiness. It's not only readiness in terms of the technologies. It includes that, but it's not only that, but it's also an awareness that things are changing, I think. So that's why there are challenges, but we shouldn't leave this to the governments only. We have to try to do something within, for example, our business support organizations now at this stage, as it is not that easy for the companies to adjust very rapidly. Selin Hanım, Sibel Hanım.
Before Serena, maybe I could just and say that, for example, I mean, instead of single companies joining the race themselves, it is much easier with a joint force that they can come together on the regional basis on specific issues with the foresights that have been presented to them. So I think rather than competing with each other, cooperating with each other in order to achieve something that it is not quite possible on its own, may be more possible with this alliance of the CACCI countries. That's what I would like to add, because Güven Sak has already pointed out the most important thing, that it is a challenge, but it is less of a challenge when we think of it on a regional basis rather than on an individual country basis. Thank you.
Selin, you wanted to add something?
Actually, I agree, all of them. Just like the foresight units, joint R&D platforms and the investment funds are also challenging, but are important for the same reason, for the same cooperation needs. They could let governments, companies, and universities, research institutes, startups work together on shared projects, reduce costs, and speed up innovation, actually. So working jointly means more cooperation and stronger results for the whole CACCI region. They are the reasons for recommending these policy models, actually.
Well, what I see here on the presentation is that this is not a government-driven program. It needs a cooperation of many sectors, even the academics, into having to predict what is going to happen.
I agree. And also, this is about, for all of us, we focus on understanding what's about to come, and we need to make preparations for that. And that's where organizations like CACCI, business support organizations, becomes more and more important, I think.
Now, going back to something more specific, I have a question here about AI, which is the flavor of the following years. Okay, how do you see this AI development affecting the CACCI countries? Because as you mentioned, some countries produce the technology, the US and China consume it, but the local and the national ecosystem is not developed to use what they're producing.
Mm-hmm.
How
Maybe
can
I
they?
can, yeah, I
Please.
can start saying something. I mean, there are now studies that are, made, especially labor market implications of the artificial intelligence. If you look at those studies, it looks highly likely now that an important part of the population, not only in our countries, in the developed countries too, are going to become more and more obsolete. So that means, in the past, they were building value chains to our countries. That's how globalization has worked up until now. And that created that globalization, the success of globalization. That's a good storyline that I like to talk about, has created a kind of a backlash in the developed countries. Because so many people lost their jobs, so many areas in the developed countries around Chicago, etc., in Midwest, in the United States, lost their livelihoods because of this shift of the production units into the East. And I think that these new technologies are developed to combat with that also. So I think that backlash has created Trump at the end of the day. And that backlash is led by this technological change in artificial intelligence too. And it's now going to become more and more difficult maybe for our type of countries to become part of the Western value chain. So we need to focus more on what we are going to do among ourselves by focusing on our domestic capabilities, developing our domestic capabilities also. So this is a new age, I think, and we need to think about the impact of AI by looking at the impact of AI in labor market in the developed countries. So this is what I see from a distance. Selin or Sibel?
I would just like to, I would just like to point out that it is important not to bypass the regulation side of AI, especially in the usage of AI. That it is becoming more and more important because although all over the world they are trying to come up with new regulations in order to harness the what should I say, the negative effects of AI, we have to be very careful, especially in the CACCI region, that not only using its capabilities, but harnessing the negative sides is as important with respect to AI that we should keep in mind. Thank you.
So I'm a bit not that much optimistic, let me say, when it comes to our type of countries in the process of artificial intelligence, that this process is going to take. That's why we need to focus on our own mechanisms, I think, our own ecosystems.
Which led me to this point here. There's a question about the CACCI Strategic Foresight Alliance. And I wonder if that's not only about, in the past was everything export driven, but now it's also domestic implementation. Is that part of your thinking?
It is. And Selin, would you like to say something before me, or shall I start?
Please start.
It's not. It is, in the past it's export driven, and don't forget that export driven structures were established by the Western companies, the big companies, the multinationals at the end of the day. But if there is a change in their home countries now, so we shouldn't expect that export drivenness to continue in the coming decade. So we have to be ready first of all for that. First of all, we have to look at what these new, as you have asked about AI, what these new technologies are going to bring in terms of the global value chains. It may be highly likely that most of the activities now could be transferred back to the home countries. That's with these new technologies, it's going to become more and more possible. So then in our part of the world, we have to focus on or create some new value chains among ourselves. Not only value chains in terms of producing things, but I can say that value chains to produce technologies also, so that, we can compete. We can continue exporting things, selling things, but in order to do that, We have to do that by ourselves, developing our own mechanisms. So strategic foresight includes both understanding what these new technologies are going to create in terms of those global value chains and in the home countries of the developed world. We have to understand those changes, what that's going. So it's kind of the changing nature of globalization that we need to take into account. And also, at the same time, we have to look at how, with these new technologies, we can do something together in our part of the world. I think that's also going to become. So these new technologies are bringing two things at the same time. The old global value chains that we know of may not exist in the future, that are led by the developed country companies, but those new technologies can also give the freedom to us to develop our new value chains, our domestic value chains, our regional value chains. I think that's the area that we need to focus on. That's what I understand, or that's what I have in mind with this strategic foresight alliance.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Selin, you wanted to ask something?
Maybe I can add a small point about strategic foresight unit. It can start with identifying where CACCI stands today, what data is missing, and which technology domains could come first. And the first practical step could also be to focus on a pilot cooperation model for just one or two technology domains where CACCI already has strength, such as advanced connectivity, which we see the stronger position of CACCI countries. And I think there are fields where joint projects could start quickly by the design of strategic foresight units. Because some countries already have research and industry capacity, and designing a project such as establishing a small pilot R&D partnership or a regional data sharing initiative in these prior technology domains would be a realistic and visible start to start and sustain this strategic foresight unit. So I think we need some practical steps to start these foresight and to sustain it in this competing area.
Okay. To that point, we're running out of time, but I have one last question that maybe complement this last comment. For the policy recommendations like aligning standards, joint R&D platform, and the investment fund, are there any good examples that we can learn from?
Maybe Güven just start with some strategic foresight unit examples from like Singapore, and then I can continue with the funds. So
that's why I started with that. But regarding aligning standards and certification for critical technologies, we shouldn't forget that this area is, fast developing. It's changing. It's a fast changing domain. So everywhere in the United States too, there are discussions regarding that. So in the case of the strategic foresight unit, I think one other issue is to follow this discussion on the standards, on the regulatory issues also, because I think it is useful to be on the good side of the discussion when it comes to focusing on creating something new in our countries, in establishing networks for doing something. That's why I think we need to be aware of these discussions about regulations too at the same time. And I think it is helpful to have a look at the units at the governmental level. That's why I mentioned that Center for Strategic Futures in Singapore. So it might be useful to have a look at, for example, among the CACCI countries, first of all, to look for that the agencies, the units that were established for strategic futures planning, it might be useful, but I don't think those units include mechanisms for these regulatory standards. This is a discussion that's evolving in the West, and I think we have to follow that very carefully. And as I have noted, try to be on the right side or the good side of the discussion.
So to be more concrete, this Singapore model at least is a good first step
Exactly.
to create a framework as a
So.
national.
I think we have to learn from that, I think. We can learn from that.
Good. Now, we sadly run out of time. And before we conclude, I don't know if Professor Güven Sak would like to reconfirm some ideas today as a closing remarks.
No, I think I have talked a lot today, but I think we need to understand with these what's happening with these new technologies. I have noted at the start that the technology determines our lives, and the impact has become more and more profound. And that includes the fact that the nature of globalization itself is going to change. It's changing already at the same time. So that's what's going to happen with these new technologies. And I think we have to follow not only the developments in the new technologies, but the backlash that has created in the developed countries. And the political changes that backlash is now leading to is also very much important. We have to put Trump tariffs into perspective regarding that. They are trying to do something. It's not just one crazy old man doing something. They are trying to answer the demands of the population in those countries. There are people. There is some discontent in those countries created, and we in the past we like to focus on the discontent that the globalization is creating in our countries, but now with the profound success of the globalization, there is discontent in the developed countries that we need to take into account, and I think that has the capacity not only with tariff-like policy steps. But it is also important in terms of the way the new technologies are going to change our lives. So the technology determination process or the technology development process in the Western countries is going to take more of that character of doing things in the home country without need for the others. I think that's going to be an important issue that we need to take into account. That's why we need to start thinking about the measures that our companies need to take. Because if the old globalization is dead, we need to think about how to create a new one. I don't know about that, but we need to create a new basis, let me put it that way, for globalization in our part of the world. That's what regional cooperation is about.
And with that, my friends, thank you very much.
Thank you.